Welcome to On the Agenda. I'm Bong Young-sik. 2015 was a difficult year for the world economy, and Korea was no exception. We look back on what issues dominated the Korean economy and where things are headed in the new year.
The year 2015 marks the midpoint of the Park Geun-hye administration's three-year economic innovation plan. But due to multiple challenges on the domestic and global front, Korea's economy fell far short of its initial 3.8% growth target. From the start of the year, domestic consumption suffered from sluggish growth, while China's slowing economy further dragged down performance on the export front. Given the conditions, the country's economy was in dire need of government stimulus measures to prop up growth. By lowering interest rates, the government fueled expansion in the housing market while boosting spending through consumer tax cuts and nationwide sales events such as Korea's Black Friday. It also approved a $10 billion extra budget.
정부는 우리 경제가 대내외 불확실성에 불구하고 흔들리지 않고 내수 개선세가 확대될 수 있도록 정책적 노력을 다할 계획이며
메르스 이전 추세를 회복한 걸로 일단 보이고 소비나 이런 부분들이 이제 회복이 생산 투자로 이어지면서 산업 활동의 주요 지표가 많이 개선되는 모습을 보여주고 있습니다.
While the country saw 0.8% growth in the first quarter, in the July to September period, that figure jumped to 1.3%. The country is also at its best when it comes to sovereign credit ratings. It has also seen progress in economic reforms. The wage peak system has been expanding to firms nationwide, and a labor reform bill that was produced after marathon talks among involved parties is also at the National Assembly waiting final approval. But there are still concerns that growth may slow down again, following a rate hike from the US Federal Reserve and greater uncertainties in the global economy. With Korea now standing at an important juncture in terms of growth and stability, we sit down with the president of Korea Economic Institute, Kwon Tae-shin, to learn more about the state of the country's economy and how it can gain greater vitality.
With much pleasure, we have invited President Kwon Tae-shin of KERI today in the studio. Well, my first question to you is that how much crisis South Korean economy actually is. Not so long ago, Ministry of Finance, Choi Kyung-won, was quoted as saying that if South Korean economy is in a crisis, which country in the world would not be? So my question to you is South Korean economy is a special crisis, or it just happened to be in the general global economic crisis?
I think it's not crisis like 1997, not like that kind of foreign exchange crisis. Because comparing with the same year, 1996, just before crisis.
That's the Asian financial crisis.
Yes, yes. Right? Foreign exchange reserve was $33 billion, but last year, $364 billion. And short-term debt ratio, 49% those days, but last year 27%. And then our sovereign credit rating has been improved, upgraded by S&P October this year to AA-. So that means it's not crisis like that of 1997, but this time is more or less structural, long-term, fundamental crisis coming. That means we should follow like Singapore or other country. We started the same level in 1970s, and we were called four tigers or four dragons of Asia. But now Singapore per capita GDP about $60,000. Ours is $28,000.
Right, stuck below 30,000 for many years.
So if we don't do well, we may fall down. They are not going up to advanced country. That is our biggest concern. And structural problems, our potential growth rate is gradually going down. Now less, about 3%, but within 5 years, it may go down 2%. And that's coming from our structural problem. That is lowest fertility rate, 1.2, and then very fast aging society. 2018 Korea will be aged society. That means about 14% of total population will be people aged over 65. And because of that, vitality of industry is gradually going down. And then we are losing competitiveness in our major industries because China is catching up with us very quickly. And then our key industries cannot find good engine of growth. So what I'm thinking, gradually our industry is losing competitiveness and mainly coming from labor issues and then over-regulation.
Right.
So we know how to solve it, but like US Congress, our parliament is dysfunctional. They cannot do anything. And that is why I called it crisis.
Right. I appreciate you give us a very broad stroke of the current situations. It seems like you are indicating that we are not in a most serious kind of crisis yet. But if things stay the same, then it is inevitable for South Korea to pay the price in the long run.
Exactly.
Okay. Looking back on 2015, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate that Korean economy did?
I think 60%.
Okay, so 6 out of 10.
A, B, C, D, E, F, then C.
C, all right.
Because the actual achievement of growth rate, we expect around 2.6% this year, and that is lower than our potential growth rate. And it's mainly coming from sluggish export. For third quarter, net export, which means export minus import,
Right.
has reduced growth rate 0.6%. So the engine of growth used to be export.
Right.
But up until November this year, total export decreased 7.4% compared with the same period last year. So export is not doing well. But the consumption, because of base effect of the second quarter we had the MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome.
Right.
So it was very low. Compared with last quarter, it has been better because of government policy measures such as temporary holidays and then the reduction of the consumption, some consumption tax and Black Friday issues.
Right.
So consumption maybe 70%, but the main engine of growth, export didn't do well. So
which particular sector of a Korean economy especially did poorly last year? For instance, is it semiconductors or automobile, shipbuilding?
the weakest part among our 10 key export items like machinery, petrochemicals, construction. We are losing competitiveness because China is catching up with us very quickly in those areas. And also, we cannot find the alternative, the engine of growth. So our industry is experiencing a very hard time now.
But China catching up South Korean economy is a serious challenge. But at the same time, South Korean economy is increasingly dependent upon the well-functioning of the Chinese economy as a main export market of South Korean economy. So what's your forecast about a currently very sluggish Chinese economy potentially to rebound next year? Do you predict that China's economy will be rebounding next year, or are we going to live with rather sluggish Chinese economy for a while?
Yeah, I think more or less negative side.
Negative side?
As you mentioned, 26% of our export goes to China. So
26%.
China is our biggest export market.
Right.
And Chinese sluggish economy is not short-term issue because their growth rate has been more than 10% for a decade. As a result, it was delivered by the very high investment ratio.
Right.
Normal, the contribution or share of investment to GDP used to be 30 to 40% average countries, but China, about 50%.
50%.
And it was done mainly by local governments, land development, apartment building. and then public corporations, because it is easy for them to borrow money from state banks.
Right.
So when the economy was good, they overly invested. But now they are doing in the restructuring. They should get rid of bad loans and then the reduction of the existing facilities, but it is not that easy. So I think for some years to come, Chinese economy will not be as vital as before.
And what do you think of the U.S. economy? Very recently, the Federal Reserve of the United States decided to raise the benchmark interest rate by a quarter of a percentage point. That's the first time since December 2008 that the Federal Reserve actually increased the interest rate. And what's your prediction about its likely impact on South Korean economy?
First, our export will have some difficulty because it's not from us, but other the natural resources exporting country like Brazil, Indonesia, Australia. Their economy might be hurt because of the foreign exchange currency crisis or banking crisis. And then our export to these emerging countries, excluding Australia, the ASEAN countries or South America or Middle East country, altogether about 20%. So if their economy is not doing well, our export will not be doing well. And secondly, we are worrying about contagion effect. In 1997, even though we said our economy was strong and healthy, but foreign exchange crisis, Asian financial crisis, started from Thailand, Indonesia, and Malaysia. It went up.
Right.
So it is difficult to distinguish which is good or bad. So Korea is still considered emerging country. Then the Western countries, investors worry about altogether. So they cannot distinguish whether Korea is good or not. So in some sense, we may have some withdrawal of foreign investment.
What about the very low oil price in the world market? Is it a good news or bad news for South Korean economy?
Both ways.
Both ways?
Because up to now, every year, we have imported about 1 billion barrels
of
and
foreign
then
oil.
the per barrel used to be $100.
Right.
So $100 billion import every compulsory because we don't produce oil at all. So in that sense, we can reduce a lot of import and then our cost can be cut. So that is a good point.
Right.
But many of our industries dependent upon petrochemical industries,
Right.
and they are losing their market. So now, if these things continue, then we cannot export to two countries, to Brazil, Russia, Indonesia, where
The oil-producing countries.
and Middle East.
Right.
Middle East, they do not start a new big plant where
projects.
every year I think we have received about $50-60 billion construction work for plants, but it is going down.
Right. There are a lot of external factors seemingly challenging growing potential of South Korean economy in near future. But let's turn to the domestic factors. You also mentioned the influence of politics. So what should be done?
We are beginning kind of going into crisis. And then what I would like to say, if it is a sudden hard hit crisis like 1997, foreign exchange crisis, people will wake up. Then the opposition party or labor union, they all work together. But this is like a gradual, slow path to crisis.
Okay.
It is difficult to come back. Our companies are not doing well. Export is not doing well. Their sales is not doing well. To solve this, to overcome this issue, we need to let them do some restructuring like Japan did. Japan said the Industry Revitalization Act. We call Special Act on Promotion of Business Restructuring. We call One-Shot Act. It has been in Parliament for 2 or 3 years. And also we have submitted Service Industry Promotion Act. Because without promoting Service Industry Act, their productivity is much lower than manufacturing sector. Without doing that, we cannot create jobs. In manufacturing industry, because of the IT technology, because of new technology, even if you invest a lot, less and less people are hired. Whilst the tourism, hospitals, education, software, and the leisure industry, you can financing, you can create many, many jobs. That's how we can differentiate our economy with that of China and Japan.
According to the Forbes magazine, Korea is ranked at 33rd in terms of best place to do business for foreign companies. The ranking might be a bit disappointing to many people. What would you suggest for South Korean economy to be more open to foreign direct investment and foreign companies doing business in South Korea?
In market economy, the only way to create jobs and to develop is promote investment and promote private corporations. So WEF, IMD, all those competitiveness measurement institutions said to have better investment of Korea, we need to improve labor markets, we need to deregulate issues. That's how we can bring in more foreign direct investment. That's how we can persuade our companies to invest and to build the factories.
You've mentioned Korea's economy, South Korean economy, in its ties with the United States and with China. The country you have not mentioned is actually Japan. And there's a growing concern that South Korea is gradually becoming Japan in the past, suffering from what was called the lost decade, when the Japanese economy was in deep trouble, the chronic deflation. And the Park Geun-hye administration just announced that the government is going to target to raise the inflation rate in 2016 to reach 2%. I believe this is the first time since the foundation of Republic of Korea that government wants inflation to rise rather than getting lowered. So, are we going to be just like Japan since 1990s?
Our institute had done a lot of studies to compare our situation with that of Japan, and very similar.
Okay.
There is a deflationary warning indicator made by IMF, and then we did a survey, studied. We are very similar in early 1990s of Japan, just 20 years behind. And that means we are losing vitality, competitiveness, productivity of our economy. It's coming from many factors. First, consumption is not doing well because people live longer than before, 20 years, 30 years more after their retirement. So average consumption ratio has gone down during last 10 years, 5% point. So even if their income goes up, they do not spend it all. They put the money into insurance, pension, or other areas because they need to prepare for the future. So consumption is not doing well, and investment is the other source of development. But our companies losing competitiveness edge against China and Japan, other countries, and because it's coming from labor issues, it's coming from over-regulation. As a result, they don't invest a lot. So our engine of growth is gradually going down, and it is very similar with that of Japan.
Suffering from rapidly aging society with a very low birth rate to replace the major labor forces in the market.
And as a result, going down stock prices, real estate price goes down, and then more unemployment.
I'm sorry to give you another bad news, but We have to talk about Korea's snowballing household debt as a major problem these days. Now it's hovering around the $1 trillion mark. $1 trillion mark.
Exactly.
So how serious this problem is, and are there any way out of this trouble?
The only solution and fundamental solution is to create more jobs.
Create more jobs.
And people can pay back their debt. If we just try to solve it by government intervention, then there would be moral hazard. Every 5 years, when we change our government for the popularism, they try to
Make policy that will satisfy the demand of society.
Right. So that is called the personal debt rehabilitation scheme. It can solve a little bit, but the damage goes to financial institutions. They made a lot of losses. So I think this huge household debt is a big issue. Comparing with that of the 1996, those days corporate debt was a big issue. But now
It's a household
debt and government debt.
Okay. What about the mortgage market? What kind of policy the Park Geun-hye administration has to take to take care of the mortgage market?
We should be more strict whether borrowers can pay back with their income, so which is called dividend income, DIT, or loan value, LTV issues. So I think that they are importing more strict measures to see whether this borrower can pay back with their own income.
More discipline.
Yeah,
right?
more
The
discipline.
Mortgage decision. Right. Kerry, your institute released a report indicating that the annual growth rate expected for South Korean economy in the year 2016, next year, will be only 2.6%, far below 3%. But the government predicts it will be around 3.1%. So give us an overall assessment of South Korea's economic performance next year, expected in the new year. Will there be any better news coming next year?
I don't think so. I think next year we expect a little bit better than this year. Nothing good news. This year we forecast our growth rate somewhere around 2.5%, and next year 2.6 or 2.7. And the good news is American economy is picking up, which is the proof of the
Janet Yellen's decision to raise the interest
That means
rate.
the economy is healthy, becoming better. But except U.S. economy, our main trading partner, Chinese economy, seems sluggish for many more years to come. Japan, we don't know whether Abenomics will succeed or not. They succeeded putting in more money by monetary policy and fiscal policy, but we don't know whether their restructuring policy will succeed or not. And EU is not doing well. And all other emerging markets, because of low oil prices, no natural resources prices, they are having difficult time. So there is no good news from the world. And even in this bad weather, if we are very strong and healthy, we can overcome it. Like Singapore, all those countries, like Switzerland. To do that, we should be more competitive. But our politics is blocking to improve our competitiveness.
All right. But then I'd like to ask you to give a piece of wise advice to politicians and the administration, as opposed to advice to economists. What should be done in domestic politics for South Korean economy to meet this current challenge and maintain at least some of its long-term growth potential?
They call economic democratization. When it comes to economy, there is no democracy, market economy. But now I would like to say politics economization. Politicians should think about the impact to our economy and then future of Korean economy. If Korean economy going down,
there's no
there's no future.
Right.
But
Future for democratization at all.
politicians, more or less very short-sighted people, they only think about short-term vote. But I wish they are the leaders of this country who can save this country for our next generation, for our young people. So I think they should behave more like thinking more about our future.
Right. All right, President Kwon, I have received a lot of dignitaries as guests, and you are one of the most outspoken, frank, and foresighted guests. We are extremely pleased to have you today in the studio for this interview. Thank you so much.
It is my great honor. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Over half a century, Korea has gone from a war-torn nation of poverty to Asia's fourth largest economy. Now, with the global economy stuck in the slow lane and other issues at home challenging sustainable growth, the country will need to look for new solutions to address some of these deeply rooted problems. Thanks for watching.